You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. With Indeed sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates, so you can reach the people you want faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Don't wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/ARTS. Just go to Indeed.com/ARTS right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.
When your team's curious and ready to grow, they do their best work, and that changes everything. At CBT Nuggets, we've spent over 25 years making IT training engaging, hands-on, and fun. Expert-led courses, virtual labs, real-world skills your team can use right now. From networking to cloud to cybersecurity, we build skills and confidence that drive results. Believe in your team. Give them the tools to thrive at cbtnuggets.com/solutions.
Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us again on the Seafood Matters podcast. You can help me by pressing subscribe and sharing with family and friends. In this episode, I'm delighted to welcome Mike Cohen, Chief Executive of the NFFO, National Federation of Fishermen Organisations. Hi, Mike. Welcome.
Hi, Jim. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you. Before we get going, for the benefit of our listeners, can you walk us through your career, the path that brought you to the NFFO, and the role you play there now?
Yeah. So I did a fair few different things before I came into the fishing industry. I joined the fishing industry about 14 or 15 years ago when I helped some of the guys in Bridlington to set up the Holderness Fishing Industry Group there. Helped them set it up, ended up running that organisation for a little while. I was out of the industry for a little bit and then came back to take up a post with the NFFO nearly 4 years ago now. While I was at the Holderness Fishing Industry Group, we were affiliated with the NFFO. I sat on the NFFO board and I was chairman for a couple of years and kind of really liked the way the Federation did things, liked the way it worked. So when a job came up here, I was quite keen to take it.
It's interesting when you speak about the Holderness, i.e. quite a bit distance away from it, but I just always took Holderness as a geographical area. There's obviously more to it than that.
Yeah. So Holderness and the Holderness ports, Bridlington, Hornsea, Withensea and Easington. Back when I was there, I don't think there's fishing boats in Easington anymore. But yeah, biggest lobster fishery in Europe in that area and a really significant number of boats. At its high point, the fishing industry group there, I think we had 84 fishing boats, 3 merchants, processor, all associated with us. It was really well supported, really strong organisation. We had our own research arm, we had a research boat and a wet lab on the quayside, and we did a lot of interesting things there.
And I think there's no whitefish fishing there just now. Is that through political reason or fishing reason?
Stock decline in that part of the East Coast over the years meant that the East Yorkshire fleet, the Holderness fleet, gradually transitioned over to shellfish, developed that fishery to its current state, a really, really strong fishery, and kind of ran with it. So it's big and successful as a shellfish fishery. A little bit more whitefish further north, but no, not a substantial fishery for that anymore in that part of the world.
And what's the role of the NFFO?
The NFFO's role, I guess, best explained as an umbrella for producer organisations and regional fishermen's associations around England and Wales, and a few individual members too. And our job is to do what our members want us to do. So we represent our members' interests in a whole load of different spheres. We spend a lot of time talking with politicians, talking to offshore developers, and talking to officials about anything that affects our membership, be it a single member with an issue with the local port authority to hundreds of members potentially affected by plans to, say, ban bottom trawling in MPAs.
If I could, before we go on to discuss that further in the Oceans film with David Attenborough, what's your views on Prime Minister's deal with and the Brexit reset.
Yeah, a terrible deal as far as I'm concerned from a fishing industry standpoint. We've given away access to our waters for the next 12 years. And the ability to control access was the best hope we had, the easiest way of encouraging growth and development and improvement in UK fishing. We've given away a huge tool in our arsenal. It's not the only way for fishing to thrive and to grow, but it was certainly the best and the easiest one. And we've given that away. And what I think, you mentioned the Prime Minister specifically, what galls me the most is the way that he has represented our industry when he's talked about this and when he's been challenged about this in Parliament. He's talked about us, implied that we're stuck in the past, that we're not willing to move forward, when in actual fact, he's moved us back to the deal done in 1972. He's taken us back to that position. Just at the point when we were going to move forward towards something new, he is the one taking us back, or his government is taking us back. He's been very disingenuous in the way he's represented his deal, claiming that it will make it possible to sell shellfish into Europe. So we are selling shellfish into Europe in large quantities. Make it possible to sell non-depurated bivalve mollusks, but I don't think that's what he's trying to imply. And all of that given away for nothing yet. An agreement to try to reach an agreement on an SPS deal. And the process of reaching that agreement, I've heard estimates anywhere from 18 months to 4 years. And talks haven't, or if they've started, they've only just barely started. Last I heard, they hadn't even begun. So we may get an SPS deal at some point in the future, maybe. And in return for that, he's given away access to British waters for 12 years worth something like £500 million a year. That's an astonishingly bad deal.
Well, obviously, there's plenty of people of the same view as you. And I was listening to one of the Labour MPs who was behind all this back in Starmer and also in favour of the ban on trawling. And I've actually invited her to come on. If she has an opinion on it, come on and we'll talk to you. I haven't yet had acknowledgement of my email.
There's a surprise, and it's a shame, isn't it? I think our representatives should be willing to back up their ideas, shouldn't they?
Yeah, I feel if she has an opinion, I'm not just taking a scattergun approach and trying them all, but she had an opinion and she was vocal in the public about it, but still wouldn't. Anyways, but Mike Park, in a previous podcast, he was of the absolute same mind as you. And as he says, by giving the 12 years away, you've lost a bargaining position.
Yeah, and we've seen how well the Norwegian government does for its fishing industry by holding that bargaining chip, that ability to control access. They certainly did very well with us immediately after Brexit, when they did just stepped away, declined to let us have access, and ended up in a much stronger position as a result. So, yeah, we had all the evidence of what could be done with that, and still, we opted to crawl back to the 70s. Very backward-looking, a strange approach to take from a government that claims to value food security and claims to be all about growth. Inconsistent with that messaging, and perhaps government has moved on from its promises post-election, but certainly hasn't made good on them in the meantime.
No, indeed. Moving on to the film, the feeling, the fallout. What was your gut reaction when you first saw the Attenborough film calling for a blanket ban on bottom trawling?
I mean, that was a heart sink moment, I think, for a lot of us. As soon as somebody like David Attenborough is made to say something like that, the game's up. We can't possibly compete with any campaigning organisation that has the ability to buy an endorsement somebody like him. He's such a beloved figure. He's beyond criticism, and the things he says are can become beyond the need to prove or to demonstrate. So that was a pretty bleak moment, I think, for a lot of us. An endorsement from somebody so beloved is something that we are going to struggle to counter with something as unpopular as facts.
For sure. Are we seeing a campaign to ban something that's deeply misunderstood by the very people pushing the ban?
I think the people pushing the ban understand it perfectly well. I think the people that they're trying to persuade to support them don't, and that's the real problem. The idea of banning a way of producing food on a large scale in the absence of compelling evidence that the ban is necessary is sort of slightly ridiculous. I think we've almost become too comfortable with things. And that's what sort of the general public has, and that's what's allowed this sort of thing to take hold. We have a lot of rhetoric around food security at the moment, but I don't think people really feel it. I don't think they really believe there's an issue with that. It's a long time since the general public worried about where its food was going to come from. And so we're happy to just take on trust that we should ban a major method of food production in the absence of evidence, because people don't really feel that necessity. And it's that ban in the absence of evidence that really worries me. That's what is really pernicious about this. It's establishing the idea that we will ban a fishing modality without significant evidence that it is harmful, or that it is harmful in those places, or that the places they're trying to ban it are really that fragile. We're moving away from the principle of managing fisheries on the basis of evidence, and we're moving towards the principle of managing it on the basis of feelings from people who don't have knowledge. And because people don't feel that necessity to look after their food security, we're happy to go with how I feel after I've watched a film, or after someone I trust reads some lines about it to me. Go back to the Second World War. Fishermen were heroes. People really felt the food security. Food was rationed, food was scarce, and people were genuinely worried about where a meal was going to come from. And fishermen who went out and got that food were heroes and were lauded for it. Now we just don't believe that it could all go wrong. So it's really easy to persuade people to go down that line.
When the film was launched with royalty celebrities and big heavyweight NGOs, but the people, what I would say, with salt in their blood and decades of knowledge were nowhere to be seen. Why were fishermen and fisheries scientists left out the picture?
Yeah. I mean, they had a Spice Girl at the premiere. What can any of us do against that level of expertise? I guess it's very telling, isn't it? Fishermen weren't there, fishery scientists weren't there, because
You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. With Indeed sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates, so you can reach the people you want faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Don't wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/ARTS. Just go to Indeed.com/ARTS right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.
Shop the Sherwin-Williams Labor Day sale and get 35% off paints and stains August 22nd through September 4th. With prices starting at $31.84, it's the perfect time to transform your space with color. Whether you're looking to revamp your interior or exterior, we have you covered with bold hues, soothing neutrals, and everything in between. Visit your neighborhood Sherwin-Williams store or shop the sale online. Delivery available on qualifying orders. Click the banner to learn more. Retail sales only. Some exclusions apply. See store for details.
The film isn't about the science, and it isn't about industry, and scientists and fishermen were not part of putting those claims together, because it isn't about that. It's about campaigning on a point of view, because that's what the people who funded it wanted to be expressed. And it's really, really effective. As a commissioned campaigning piece, it's enormously effective. But if you're commissioning a piece to campaign for an outcome, you don't invite along the people who are going to question that. And so that we weren't part of that.
Fishermen put everything simple. Would a film about farming without a farmer be taken seriously? So is this acceptable in a film about fishing?
Absolutely not. But I guess it's not a film about fishing. It's a film about banning fishing. So you have people on the film about banning fishing who want to ban fishing. You don't have fishermen there, because they put a different point of view. It's really, really telling, isn't it? I was really lucky to be invited along to watch a film last night produced by a Dutch filmmaker about the North Sea, which hasn't got the big distribution that this has, because it told a balanced story. It was a great film. It's going to start doing it around a few kind of smaller cinemas. It's called North Sea, I think Nature Untamed, something like that. And it's fantastic, a real passion project from a Dutch underwater cameraman who documents the North Sea because it's where he first fell in love with nature and diving. And what struck me was how balanced this movie was. It talks about fishing and highlights the issues that fishing has, like any industry has. It has its downsides, but also the benefit it brings in terms of jobs and food. And it talks about wind farms and the value of producing clean energy, but also the downsides in terms of the environmental damage. It was such a balanced piece of filmmaking, which just accepted that humans are part of their environment like any other living thing, and we need to balance it. It set out questions and didn't claim to be able to answer them, and it did a different job. Oceans is not trying to do that job. It's not setting out to be balanced or to tell a story about what a place is like and how people can live in it. It's setting out to tell a story that is fishing is bad, don't like it. That was its agenda, and it does it really, really well, but that's not an agenda I'm comfortable with.
Do you think the public has been misled by emotional storytelling, or is it dressed up as science?
I think it's an entertainment product. With a kind of artist's recreation of what they think fishing might be like, and people are, believe it's real and believe some of the claims in it as real, and I think that's really unfortunate. It's very, very hard for fisheries scientists and people involved in industry to talk about what the reality is like when you're faced with those sorts of production values and that sort of budget. To make a film about a particular outcome and to advocate for a particular outcome. There's a truism that I think called Brandolini's law. You can lie in a sentence, but it takes a paragraph to refute it, and nobody bothers reading a whole paragraph anymore. It's really, really easy to give a glib answer and just say, there's a problem, ban this and it'll all get better. That's a really, really easy soundbite to buy. The reality is just less glamorous. Nobody's going to watch a film which has the message of actually lots and lots of very ordinary people of goodwill are doing their best to reach a decent outcome for the sea, and by and large they're doing a pretty good job of it. It's not perfect, but they're well on their way. Nobody's watching a movie with that. You can't stick that on the side of a bus and get people to vote for it. You need to say, ban this sick filth now. The sea is in a terrible state. They're a fisherman. Ban them. That's really easy, and you can sell that. And that's what we're up against here. It's always what we're up against. We're trying to... it's always what we're up against when people start to try and make this an issue about what people like and what people feel, rather than just trying to get on with the job of producing food and providing jobs and living with the sea as part of it.
Do you feel... It certainly concerns me a bit if it's almost now roundabout way history repeating itself. I see it similar to the campaign to ban seal culls, and that was Hollywood movie stars and models, and you just felt, well, what do they know about seals and now bottom trawling? And that was pretty effective. And right round Scotland here, I'm born and brought up in a small fishing village with one of the best salmon rivers in the country. And ask any local now, it's gone from one of the best salmon rivers. You never saw us. Very seldom did you ever see a seal. And now you look at the estuary and the mouth of the harbour and river, and it's full of seals and there are no salmon.
Complicated issues don't lend themselves to simple solutions, do they? And that's what we've got here. I guess in defence of, the one thing we can take away that's positive from everything that's happened around the Oceans film is it's shown us how much people value the sea, or at least they value their idea of the sea. The disappointing thing is that it's shown how little people really know about it and really understand about it. If we had the sort of reach that could tell people what the sea is really about, and could help people to understand it a bit better, it would be great to mobilize that enthusiasm for people to sort of speak out in favor of better, more realistic, more workable marine management, things that will work. But instead we have this campaigning over something completely different. And I think that's one of the things that is most disappointing about this campaign. We've got a campaign to ban bottom trawling, a really valuable form of food production, across areas that were not designated because they're particularly fragile, but were designated in order to reach a goal to just designate a large percentage of the sea by a given arbitrary date. Now we've got people hammering for a ban on something they don't really understand, with little evidence that it will really help those areas. If those people really care about the state of the sea and really want it to get better, they're going to be terribly disappointed when we ban an activity that isn't really damaging a lot of those places. I'm not going to claim that bottom trawling should happen everywhere. It shouldn't. We should be looking at protecting the marine environment and looking to safeguard features of the seabed that are important to the functioning of those ecosystems and which are vulnerable to disruption. But a large number of those areas, or a large part of those areas that are currently facing a ban, probably don't fall into that category. We're going to be banning food production in areas of mud or sand or gravel that are no more seriously disturbed by a fishing trawl than they are by a wave. And if people really think the sea's in a bad state, they're going to be incredibly disappointed when they find out we just banned something that didn't help. We banned something, we've put people out of work, we've reduced the amount of sustainable, low-carbon food that we produce, so we'll just import more to make up for it, and the sea won't get any better. But obviously, that's not really the agenda behind the film, is it? The agenda is to keep up that sense of outrage, that sense of crisis, to keep people who campaign for things in a living. And in that sense, it's certainly served its purpose. But if what you really hope is that the sea is suddenly going to get healthy as a result of this intervention, you're going to be horribly disappointed. But given I don't think we have much in the way of plans to monitor these sites after we've designated them, nobody will ever know, will they?
Well, I remember an ICES scientist on a podcast and this is from ICES, and they said, look, when you've closed an area, they're not talking about MPOs, just closed areas, he says you've got to keep monitoring it.
Yeah. No, one of the most depressing comments I ever heard in a meeting was after the designation of the first highly protected marine areas a couple of years ago, where an official said, right, we've got the sites designated. Now we just have to see if we'll get enough budget to do a baseline survey. A baseline survey to find out what was in the site after it had been designated.
Oh.
So now we've banned stuff. Now let's find out why we've banned it. Quite ridiculous. I've done some marine survey work in my time. This is not rocket science. Survey before, do an intervention, survey after, and then you know if the intervention worked. Because if the people clamoring for this actually care about what happens to the seabed, they should want whatever they do to work. That means they should be wanting an up-to-date survey to find out what is in these areas. And then they should be wanting to be really sure that the right areas are being protected. And then they should be looking to survey them regularly to see what the impact is. And if there isn't an improvement, they should be looking to do something different instead. And if that isn't your intention, if you don't intend to target your intervention where you know it will work, and then keep an eye on it to make sure it's helping, and be ready to pivot really quickly to something else if it's not helping, if that's not what you want to do, then your interest isn't really in conservation. Your interest is in being seen to do some conservation, not to actually improve things. And I'm not seeing plans here that look like actual improvement.
When you're saying that, you reminded me of a recent podcast with Mark Dickey-Colas, and he says, now you're saying there that they're closing an area or banning something before they really know if it needs it or not. But he actually tells us that they don't, for all the equipment and everything they have at their disposal, they don't monitor it to see the effects as it is banned.
And that's just such a wasted opportunity. I'm not arguing for no conservation measures at sea. That would be really stupid. Nobody loses more if we let our seas become unhealthy than fishermen. We hear a lot about marine stakeholders. Most of the time what we mean is people who have an opinion about the sea. They don't know, they don't have experience, they haven't got something at stake that they will lose. A stake is the thing you lose if you put a bet on and the bet doesn't go your way. Well, fishermen have staked everything on healthy seas. They've staked their livelihoods, their businesses, their ability to support their families.
You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. With Indeed sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates, so you can reach the people you want faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Don't wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/ARTS. Just go to Indeed.com/ARTS right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.
They've staked a lot on it, and they will lose that stake if we get marine management wrong, and if our seas become unhealthy, and if they don't support thriving fish populations. So I'm not against marine conservation. I'm against doing things that won't work for likes. I'm against things that will, or that fail to treat people as part of the ecosystem they live in, and assume that we will just, I don't know, eat social media notoriety instead of food for a while, or that we'll just import everything indefinitely and that'll somehow be fine, and we'll export our environmental impacts to a different country rather than managing them and living with them sensibly. Now, that's what I object to, not the idea of conservation. It's necessary, it's required, and fishermen are part of that in projects all around the country, and that's something that's ignored all the time.
To call it out, you obviously don't see the film as a conservation film. Do you think maybe it's eco-propaganda? And what are the risks of a celebrity-led campaign in complex areas like fisheries?
And it's a campaigning piece, isn't it? And it's, when you compare what fishermen or what the fishing industry are trying to do to kind of defend their ability to make a livelihood and to keep doing the thing that they are licensed to do by government, with the people campaigning that film, you're comparing two different things. The people who make that film, their job is to persuade, to make movies in support of a particular objective. Their job is PR and publicity and campaigning. Fishermen's job is producing food. We are in the fishing industry not PR experts. We don't have the £3 million, I believe I read, that it took to make that film. I can't just go out and hire a national treasure, give them a script and say, please read that and tell everybody how great fishing is. And isn't it slightly ludicrous, or more than slightly ludicrous, that we're having to defend producing healthy, low-carbon food as though we're doing something wrong? Fish is the only kind of animal protein that government advice says we should eat more of. And yet here we are having to almost continually act apologetic for producing it, as though 95% of the population don't eat meat every week, well, all the time, most people daily, as though we are a nation that doesn't treat fish and chips as one of its most beloved national dishes. What a strange world it is that we now act so almost ashamed of doing something that people are so enthusiastic about, really. There's a disproportionate impact of campaigning and of the sort of little social media or online bubbles that drive public narratives. The
way you put that, Mike, is really quite clever, and it's true. And when you think of it, they're going to just say close an area. They don't know. They've nothing done in advance to know why they're closing it, and then after it's closed, they don't know what effect the closure is having. So the only impact there is fishermen losing their jobs.
Yeah, absolutely. It's what a strange situation, isn't it? It's like telling everybody you've just spent a huge amount of money buying a Ferrari. The guy you bought it off is keeping it in a lock-up garage. You haven't seen it, and you're not going to have a look at it, but you know you own a Ferrari now. So that's great. I've got a Ferrari. I'll never drive it. I'll never see it. I've never seen it, but I own one now. So now I feel great because I'm a Ferrari owner and I'm happy. What a stupid situation to be in. So yeah, it's annoying. It's counterproductive. It's maddening that we are wasting time on this, on having to defend what we do like this, when we should be doing something positive. I don't want to be defending the industry just for doing what it's always done. I don't want to be having to go to ministers and say, as a result of your EU reset deal and now this announcement from the Secretary of State, the government will ban bottom trawling. I know we've got a consultation going on about it, but the Secretary of State has announced what he feels the outcome of the consultation is going to be. The leader of the House, the person in the Labour Party or the government who announces government policy, has in the House of Commons said the government will ban bottom trawling across all protected areas, and was so happy with the remark she tweeted out a video of herself saying it. So they are massively prejudging the outcome of this consultation. I don't want to be spending this time talking about that. I'd like to be talking about positive things. I'd like to be talking about ways that government can support us with recruitment into the industry, with new technology, with new marketing, so that we can make fisheries more sustainable and more profitable. That's what we should be talking about. And instead, I'm having to tell ministers, my members are calling me up saying, do you think there's any chance we could get a decommissioning scheme? Because I just don't see any hope for the future, and how the hell do I pay off the mortgage on my boat? And that's just appalling. That's just ridiculous that I'm having to say to people, yes, next time I talk to the minister, I promise I'll ask for some money so that you're not left destitute. What a world. A productive, successful business. But due to those actions from government, it now faces, people are facing a nightmare scenario.
A productive business run sustainably.
Absolutely. Producing sustainable food that people like to eat.
Yeah.
In a way that is incredibly heavily, strictly managed, rightly so, provides jobs in coastal towns where there are very few other ideas about how to provide jobs. And this government seems to have no more thought for that than any other. And yet we're talking about closing down businesses. Now, the government came to power talking about growth and that local communities and small businesses will be the engine for growth that they saw as a way of driving the nation forward. And what are we seeing? Well, we told them in advance the EU talks, give us better access to 6 to 12 nautical miles, and the fishing industry, small businesses, will be able to grow sustainably and expand cautiously. Well, they threw that away. And then they introduced proposals to close down established businesses too. That doesn't feel like a growth agenda to me.
It's just crazy. I think it's clever the way you show that or say it. It's brilliant. Do you feel there should be a duty to reflect the science with films like this? Or is good lighting and compelling voiceovers enough to sway public opinion?
Yeah, I would love it if there had to be some balance. There's got to be freedom for people to make films and do the things the way they want. But I think what the general public doesn't understand is how these things get to be made. They see David Attenborough's name attached to something, and they think back to his days at the BBC, the Natural History Unit, that he did so much incredible work at, and they think this is just a continuation of that. It's another one of those BBC documentaries and trustworthy. And instead, it's paid for by private interests that want a message put out. Minderoo Foundation, Andrew Forrest's organisation that funded this, is a charitable giving arm of one of the world's largest mining corporations, run by a man worth 32 billion Australian dollars who made his money from mining in the Australian outback and from large-scale cattle ranching. So a man who digs up the land and sells an awful lot of cheap beef would like us very much to look at what people on the other side of the world are doing in the sea, and doesn't want us eating fish. It's not incredibly hard to see the agenda, is it? The way that any other industry, particularly energy and aggregates and other things that happen in the sea, is entirely left out of that narrative. Is that's not an accident. That's not a bug. It's a feature. It's a piece of campaigning, and we can't compete with those sorts of campaigning organisations that greenwash the profits or the activities of big business.
You don't see him as the villain, but do you see that he's telling a dangerously incomplete story? And when you've got the voice of God as a global platform...
Yeah, we all have to be so careful about what we say, don't we? As soon as David... I have to tip my hat to the people that managed to get David Attenborough attached to this. It was a brilliant move, because suddenly you're unimpeachable. Everybody loves David Attenborough, and we can't be too critical too loudly, because the man's a saint, and any suggestion of criticising him immediately means nobody will listen to you. And the sad thing is, so many fishermen love David Attenborough's films and love what he does. People who aren't in the industry don't get how much fishermen love the natural world, how connected they are to it, far more than just about anybody else I've ever met, and how much they like what Attenborough does and follow it, and what a sense of betrayal people feel now that he's been used as the tool to stick the knife in them, because he didn't make this film. He read out the script for it. But we have to be careful, don't we? And I know that anything we say about this, anything we say critically, gets piled on social media. I certainly get plenty of hate mail from people who've seen the film and hate what they do. Have managed to find our email address online. I've had stories of fishermen having abuse shouted at them on the quayside from members of the public who've seen Attenborough's film and think that what they're doing is dreadful. Not even necessarily trawlermen. We had a potter in Cornwall being abused by a member of the public the other day, followed off the quayside with somebody shouting abuse at him. And that's what you get when you have the money to do these sorts of things. And it's something that I've said it to officials, and I'd like to reflect it to politicians too. It is high time that
You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. With Indeed sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates, so you can reach the people you want faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Don't wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/ARTS. Just go to Indeed.com/ARTS right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.
Politicians, particularly those in government, started to moderate the language they are using around this issue. When Steve Reed talks about destructive practices, when we have politicians hamming up the impact that they have imagined that fishing has had, politicians who've never come to speak to us or any other fishermen from inland constituencies with no interest in these issues, start to talk about devastation and destruction and use language like that, they stir up hatred against fishing communities in a way that leads to these sorts of things. Now, I get that it's kind of my job to have people say mean things about me, and I don't really care very much. I used to be a school teacher. I'm used to people shouting at me. But it's not right that fishermen should have to do that just for doing a job that they pay handsomely for a license to do. Our politicians, our government needs to think about the rhetoric it is using to demonize communities that they don't understand. Consider whether they would use that sort of language about any other community. And if they wouldn't, maybe have a little look at themselves and what they're doing. And they know very well they're doing this for their own benefit and notoriety, and to tap into what they think is a prevailing mood. But we all know that prevailing public moods driven by online discourse don't last for very long, and it'll be on to something else next. But that's not fair, and it's not right. So if we're going to have this conversation, firstly, as we've said already, it would be nice if it was based on facts, not on feelings, when we're talking about people's livelihoods. But really, government politicians need to tone the language down and stop putting fishermen at risk of this sort of behaviour, because it's not right.
You mentioned earlier, you just made about the aggregate. I mean, the film hammers bottom trawling, but ignores aggregate dredging, seabed mining, offshore wind farms, and industrial cabling.
Yeah, it skips all of those issues, doesn't it? And that's not me saying that I want to attack those other sectors, because I don't. We need to use the sea in all sorts of ways, in the same way that we need to use the land in all sorts of ways. We shouldn't be somehow ashamed of being an organism that lives in its environment like any other. We're just mammals at the end of the day, and we change our environment as we live in it like any other. All those sectors have a claim on the sea, or I have a job to do in the sea that's illegitimate in its own way, but it needs to be balanced and it needs to be managed just like fishing does. But it's very easy to target fishing, to point out the bad things about it because of the nature of our industry. The big players in the cabling industry are Google and Amazon, are the big players in subsea cables. The big players in offshore wind are mostly state-owned or state-backed energy companies with profits in the billions. You don't particularly want to go after a company like that, which can respond quite forcefully, both legally and with its own PR initiatives. So go after the fishing industry, where everybody's a self-employed share fisherman and businesses are small and local and isolated and can't afford to commission a movie of their own. Fishing's targeted because it's easy. And if what you want to do is create a sense of permanent crisis that will drive people to keep consuming your either your campaigning materials, or will keep donating to you, or will demonstrate to the corporate clients who pay you to campaign that this is still a good investment for their greenwashing money. I wasn't out in Nice for the Oceans Summit there, but we had some colleagues were, and said there were billboards around Nice calling for ban on bottom trawling for Oceania, I think it was, funded by Talisker Whiskey and Dolce & Gabbana, those well-known marine conservation organisations. They clearly see a benefit to their own PR in paying for something that will attack fishing. And they're paying a campaigning corporation like Oceania, US campaigning company, to do that for them, because they think that's a good investment. They think that's good for their brand to do that, so they'll do that. And so there's a strong incentive for those campaigning companies to keep that sense of crisis and to target something like fishing that can't fight back. They're not going to start targeting, I don't know, Ørsted, a state-owned energy giant, and say it's doing naughty things, because, well, Ørsted turns over $1 billion in profit most years and probably has plenty of ability to fight back. Well, we don't.
Attenborough's, yes, we talk about a national treasure and all that. He's not going to be in coastal communities any longer.
No, that's a shame. I think it's a hard thing for a lot of people. As I say, an awful lot of fishermen I know love the work he done, find it inspiring and wonderful, and it still is, and it doesn't detract from any of that. Any more than the fact that he started out his career making films of people going and capturing wild animals to put on display in zoos for paying customers. That's the sort of thing that would be considered deeply unethical nowadays. And London Zoo, that was part of those early films, has distanced itself from the things it did in the past. And that doesn't stop people liking all the wonderful stuff he did since, and the stuff he's done now to attack fishermen and fishing communities without ever actually going and meeting any of them or informing himself about them. That doesn't take away all the good stuff he's done in the past. But it's a shame. It's terribly, terribly sad that this is what is being treated as his swan song by the people that book these jobs for him. It's a real shame to go out on such a negative note, punching down quite so hard and quite so much at ordinary working people.
You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. With Indeed sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates, so you can reach the people you want faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Don't wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/ARTS. Just go to Indeed.com/ARTS right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.
Do most people have any idea, do you feel, like, how tightly regulated UK fishing is today?
No, I don't think they do, because again, that's part of that complicated and kind of quite boring narrative about how the world really works. The people aren't really interested in stories about folks poring over spreadsheets of fish stock stock science analyses and working out what the best thing to do for the next 12 months is. But that's the reality. It isn't very glamorous, and it doesn't really. You're not going to make a movie about that because it's just the day job for an awful lot of people. So people don't understand it. But I mean, I don't understand plenty of industries out there. It's not my job to. Similarly, I don't expect the government to consult me about its policy on those industries. It's in a strange thing that we keep having public consultations about the fishing industry, and nobody's consulting me on the automotive industry, and nor should they. I haven't got a clue about building cars. But yet we'll do it with fishing. It's something that I've kept talking about in the past couple of years, particularly with politicians. It's about time we started treating fishing as an industry, stop caricaturing it as a conservation problem, and start talking about it as an industry. When everybody was falling over themselves to ensure that government rescued British steel, they didn't talk about British steel as fundamentally a problem to do with air pollution. It's an industry. It provides jobs. It provides a natural resource that's important to the nation. Yes, like any other industry, it's got, in the case of steel production, it produces some pollution, which is dealt with by sensible regulations. But we don't see the regulation of the emissions of that industry as the only thing that we need to be concerned about. We think about it properly. Jobs, resources, materials, the national economy. Why is it we only ever talk about fishing, or the public discourse is only ever about the side effects that need to be regulated, the conservation issues, as though it isn't also about jobs and fundamentally food production and contributing to the economy like every other industry?
It's making me think, why does the media seem obsessed, do you feel it is, with problems in fishing while progress barely gets a mention?
Yeah, it's a shame, isn't it? I would really like to be talking about some of the good news stories. It would be great to be invited onto podcasts to talk about, all the great initiatives, the Young Fishermen's Network down in Cornwall, the trials of new types of more selective gear, the work that we're doing at decarbonising fishing by looking at alternative propulsion technologies, all the things we're doing to look forward to the future, to make the industry even cleaner and even more sustainable, and to encourage more people into it and to show them what a great life it can give you. I wish I was talking about things like that. I wish I was spending my time doing those sorts of things. It's such a shame that we are wasting our time on, not wasting our time here, I hasten to add, but wasting our time kind of in the general discourse in trying to defend what we do as though we haven't been doing it for such a long time and as though it isn't so valuable.
What real progress have you seen in UK fisheries that never seems to make the headlines?
Well, we've talked about that. Touched on some of the technological innovations and the work that's been done to look at them in the future. Slightly controversially, I want to say fisheries management plans. I know they're not universally popular by any means, but the idea behind that, the idea of getting scientists and managers and fishermen together, treating them with equal esteem and their knowledge and their expertise with equal value, and saying, okay, start from first principles. How should we manage this stock better? How should we manage this region better? I know the outcomes have been far from perfect, and a lot of us are really frustrated that implementation of the first round of FMPs hasn't really got off the ground as well as it would like yet. But just that principle that we'll get people together who actually know what they're talking about, get them to face the difficult questions and try and come up with an answer. That's really positive. It should be seen as really positive. Obviously, not every FMP is going to be great, and there's going to be plenty of people who grumble about the way particular FMPs end up being written. I will be one of them, no doubt about it. But that's good, isn't it? That we're part of that conversation rather than just waiting to see what we get handed down through the CFP remotely and with no opportunity to influence it. That's a really big thing. The commitment to science, evidence-based fisheries management, the JFS and the Fisheries Act supposedly putting environmental protection, food production, economy and social benefit on an equal footing. In practice, it doesn't seem to wash that way, but that's what the law calls for. Those are big things. The start of treating food security as a serious issue and talking about fish as part of that, that's a positive step. Everything hasn't been achieved at once, but those are positive steps, things that we wouldn't necessarily thought a few years ago we would be having a conversation about. They're good things. We should be looking at developing them and bringing out the real potential of them instead of defending us for just doing what we do.
When you get somebody like Attenborough with such a global platform, and the fishing sector, as you mentioned, doesn't have a loud voice. Do you feel this is a fair fight or environmental bullying?
It's in no way a fair fight, and isn't it depressing that we're having to have a fight about it at all? But it isn't. But as I said before, on the one hand, you've got people whose job it is to campaign about things and produce PR, and on the other hand, you've got people whose job it is to produce food. We aren't playing the same game, and we're always going to struggle with that. It's profoundly unequal because we just want to get on with producing food. We don't have the money that no big corporation is going to decide it will benefit its PR efforts to cover up whatever it's doing by pouring some money into the fishing industry. I wish they would, but for some reason they won't. Interesting, isn't it? If you really cared about sustainable fishing, just thinking about this, why not put some money into developing new fishing gear or encouraging more local people to work in the fishing industry or fund some actual marine conservation? Instead, you give money to campaigning organisations to run campaigns, which is interesting, isn't it? It's the publicity that's important, not the outcome for these folks. We're just fundamentally not doing the same thing, and that's quite dispiriting sometimes. But we have to keep doing it because of all the other good things. And I've kind of moaned on in this podcast, which isn't no good. There's a lot of positive stuff out there that we should be doing. At the end of the day, we are still producing one of the most environmentally friendly sources of protein in the human diet, and we should be proud of it. We've got new fisheries developing, and some of them doing really, really well. We should be singing about that. There's good news out there.
The other thing at times I feel seems to have slid off the picture, Mike, is fishermen. It used to hear it being classed as the most dangerous job in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've seen safety records. This isn't to take away from the fact there have been some horrible events recently. It is still the most dangerous peacetime profession. The NFFO, we are really, really committed to projects to try and reduce that. We have our safety and training officer, Charles Blythe, who's done a lot of work to try and help with that. It's a really big priority. Safety and welfare are big priorities for the NFFO, and I wish I was spending longer dealing with those issues than just trying to deal with the current campaigning stuff. But it is getting safer, and I think something that politicians who like to talk about safety in fishing need to remember is that in recent years, a lot of the tragic accidents that have happened have been as a result of stability problems, and often with people. You have to ask why these things come up. Why are people spending longer at sea? Why are people trying to get the last few more fish into their boats? Because times are hard, because fuel prices have got higher, because there's more and more concern about where income is going to come from next month, next week. People are going to increasingly in the future be driven to take more risks if their businesses keep being threatened. Fishermen put their own safety on the line every day when they go to sea to do something necessary, producing food, as well as what they love to do. We have to remember that the choices that are made about our industry indirectly make it safer or less safe when we make the job of a fisherman harder or easier. There's a lot of good work being done to make fishing safer on the technical side, but we can't make people's economic situations less precarious from within the industry. We need help. We need support with that.
Would you support any kind of ban on trawling in UK marine protected areas?
I'd support any conservation measure involving trawling, netting, potting, anything that was shown to be proportionate and necessary. And that is what we should be basing our fisheries management and our marine management decisions on. If there's evidence to show that it's necessary to maintain the health and integrity of marine ecosystems.
You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. With Indeed sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates, so you can reach the people you want faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Don't wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/ARTS. Just go to Indeed.com/ARTS right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.
And that it will work as an intervention, then it's difficult for us to argue against it, because ultimately we should benefit from that as an industry dependent on the productive capacity of marine ecosystems. We should want to safeguard that. What we can't do is act kind of ashamed of having any impact on the environment at all, because everything we do has an impact on the environment. Farming impacts the environment. Listening to a podcast impacts the environment because you need electricity to power the device that you're listening to it on, which is made involving rare earth metals dug up on the other side of the world, and it's shipped across the planet, and that uses carbon too. Everything we do impacts our environment. We can't pretend otherwise. So we shouldn't shy away from that, and we should be honest about it. So it's not that I think we should have management measures, conservation measures until fishing has no impact at all, because the only way you do that is by stopping people fishing. But we should be willing to accept measures that are necessary, that are proportionate, because they're in our interest too.
What about alternatives? And you mentioned there with maybe a more positive slant. Your views on seasonal closures, selective gear, or properly enforced MPAs with a bit of research done in advance, and would be more effective than blanket bans?
Absolutely, all things in moderation and where they'll work, and isn't that one of the most disappointing things, and one of the things that points to the agenda behind this talk about a ban. The consultation that the government is currently running doesn't have alternatives to banning trawling. It doesn't have any nuance. We aren't talking about seasonal closures. We aren't talking about gear modifications. We aren't talking about any subtlety or nuance. We're talking about blanket closures. And I know we're talking about this is, in theory, this is features based, but we've defined the features to fill the whole site, so it amounts to the same thing. We're not looking at other options. We're just jumping straight for one thing. On the back of relatively little evidence in many cases. In some cases, the right thing to do to maintain the health and integrity of a particular feature might be to exclude trawling from it. It might be. And then we have to have a sensible conversation about whether that's proportionate, whether protecting one particular feature is in proportion to the loss of food production capacity that entails. And we should be able to have that as a mature conversation. Although if trawling really is happening in these locations at the moment, and yet they are still fragile habitats, that's it's a little bit confused to me, and I struggle to get my head around it really. Trawling's gone on for a very, very long time in some of these locations, and yet they are fragile and pristine. It sounds to me a little bit as though trawling isn't hurting them if they're still fragile and pristine, despite trawling happening there for decades. Another thing that the public misunderstands is how trawling works, how all kinds of fishing works. We don't just roam around the sea hoping to come across something to catch. Fishermen fish on fishing grounds. In the same way that farmers do not just set off in a combine harvester and hope they find a field of wheat somewhere. They go to where the crop is. So any measure should be proportionate to the outcome that it's going to achieve. And we should be looking at a whole range of tools, not just one thing.
If I could make a quote and get your views on this one, Mike. Isn't this a classic case of unintended consequence? We ban bottom trawling in the UK, and we won't stop eating trawl-caught fish. We'll just import it from countries with weaker environmental and labour standards.
Apologies, my computer making loud noises there. You're right. We won't stop wanting to eat fish because there's a real disconnect between the message around banning trawling and actually producing food, and that's a real part of the problem. We will still want to import food. We will have unintended consequences of all sorts because this is because this is about managing by feelings, not about facts, not about science. It's not part of a strategic approach to the sea, and that's in danger of getting me onto my other big hobby horse, which is the need for a fishing strategy, the need for a strategic view of our industry and what it does, not just going, right, well, ban that thing there. Actually think about, okay, well, how much food do we need to produce from the sea, and how are we going to sustain that food production? I have to talk about fishing a lot with politicians who don't know anything about fishing, but who nonetheless have the ability to vote in Parliament and devastate or uplift our industry. So particularly now that we have such a lot of brand new MPs, I'm spending a lot of time talking about these issues with people who don't know anything about them. And I always start off by telling them the basic question in fisheries management is, how do we catch enough fish next year? How do we make sure that whatever we do now doesn't stop us producing the amount of food that we need in a year's time? It's not about now, it's about the future, always the future. That's what we should, this is how we should be looking at it. We're getting unintended consequences because we're not thinking, and I agree with you, we will get unintended consequences because we're not thinking about it strategically. We're not thinking about what do we want. We want a sustainable food production for the people in the UK of a affordable, healthy, low carbon food. Well, how do we get that? We don't get it by just going, well, we'll ban that kind of food production there, and maybe next year we'll ban that there, and then we'll ban this here, and somehow it'll all be fine because the grown-ups will come along and make it all right. This isn't a sensible adult conversation about producing food, is it? It's doing things because it looks shiny today, and all that social media outrage will have forgotten this, and we'll be on to whatever celebrity scandal comes next to it, and then maybe we'll decide we don't like another industry and we'll turn on them. But this isn't how we should be managing our food production as a nation. Managing for clicks and likes. It's not serious, and this is a serious issue.
What would a ban on trawling actually mean for coastal communities and local livelihoods?
It's something we need to really understand well, and what is so disappointing about the way that this is being approached is that there's been no really serious attempt to understand that before a ban is proposed. The NFFO has commissioned a piece of work from an economist who is trying to answer that for us. But just talking to people who are likely to be affected by this, we're expecting some pretty severe outcomes in some places. We're going to see the ability of a lot of fishing businesses to earn a living significantly reduced. We are likely to see losses of jobs. And of course, it's not just the catching sector that's going to suffer because of this. All the way up that supply chain, we're going to see impacts. If you reduce the impact, reduce the income of fishing businesses. Most in the industry don't have huge profit margins. You don't need to reduce income by very much to make a business unviable. And then if that business goes bust, then it's no longer providing. It's not landing anymore, so the port and the port infrastructure suffer, and there comes a point where port infrastructure can no longer be sustained by the landings into a port. And then you've got processors that no longer get the product that they need. You've got retailers that run short. You've got the direct-to-consumer settings and restaurants that start to run short. These things start to knock on very, very quickly. The really good piece of work done for the Cornish Fish Producers Organisation on looking at the true value of seafood in Cornwall found that for every job on the deck of a boat, there are 12 jobs on land, essentially is how they kind of summarise it, which is a really neat way of showing it. There's a lot more economic activity that depends on the folks in the oilskins bringing some fish to the quayside every day, and that's what gets missed. I got asked a lot about the real value of fishing around time of the EU deal, and depending on who was interviewing me at the time, depended on how they put it. But those who were kind of backing the media organisations, backing the government, wanted to say, well, look, fishing's hardly worth anything. It's only a billion. It's only £1 billion industry. What does that matter to the UK? And well, okay, that's taking the value of the first sale of the product on the quayside and saying that's it. And at the same time, we were contrasting us with the defence sector and saying that's worth many billions. And there's, I think, one statistic said like 20,000 businesses. There are not 20,000 businesses making bombs or whatever in the UK. There might be 20,000 businesses if you include haulage and catering and security and all the other things that go into supporting the small number of businesses that are actually making armaments and flogging them. So we want to make that industry look big, so we massively extend its supply chain and bring in everybody who benefits from it. You want to make fishing look small, you exclude absolutely everything other than catching fish, and you just assume that its economic impact stops as soon as that fish lands in a box, and it's nonsense. And that was something we're wanting to work on and tell that story better moving forward. And that's when we're going to start to understand the real impact of this measure.
You know, I've done a podcast in the past with a nutritionist, and she says, she's in Aberdeen University, and she reckons that there's more nutritional value.
You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. With Indeed sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates, so you can reach the people you want faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Don't wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/ARTS. Just go to Indeed.com/ARTS right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.
In fresh fish than there ever is in stuff and fish that's imported.
Yeah, it's interesting stuff, isn't it? And of course, the carbon footprint is small, the food miles are tiny. It's free range, it's local, and it provides jobs in your local community at multiple different levels. What is not to like about it? As I say, and it's a thing that Marcus Coleman at Seafish was pointing out at a conference I was at last week. Fish is the only kind of animal protein that the government advises you to eat more of. We should be proud of this. We should be delighted about it. And yet we're in such a position. Our industry's perception is controlled by people whose interest is against it, whose interest is in maintaining a sense of crisis so that people will keep funding them to be outraged. And we're not as proud of it as we should be in this country. It's a point that was made to me last week, and it really struck me that we've got record landings of in Newlyn in the last couple of weeks because of the octopus bloom in the southwest. Huge landings. Fishermen are doing really well in some areas because of this. And my first reaction to that was, oh God, we can't be too noisy about record landings somewhere. That'll be terrible. We'll get awful publicity out of that. And that's my knee-jerk reaction. It's like it's some sort of domestic abuse situation. You're kind of cowering if you do something too loud. If we were in, we were talking about this and saying, Newlands had a fantastic time at this, but we're worried about people campaigning against it because we're doing well. If this was in Spain or Portugal, there'd be an octopus festival in Newlands celebrating it. It would be great. It would be big news and everybody would be delighted. Amazing. The port's had its best ever day. Some of our local guys are doing really well for themselves. Local businesses are thriving. Absolutely great. Let's bring in more tourists. Let's celebrate it. People would be wearing octopus hats and waving flags and saying this is great. And instead, we're kind of cowering away in shame. Oh no, we've produced a load more sustainable food that people really want. It's a shocking way to be, and because the narrative is being controlled by people whose approach is not positive and who will never be satisfied. Anybody who thinks that this trawl ban, when it happens, if assuming it happens the way the government said it will be, anyone who thinks this is the end is being very naive. Then the campaigning will never stop because people are making money out of campaigning. There'll be something else next. I'm sure it'll be, once we've looked at banning trawling in MPAs, we'll probably have people calling for a trawling ban inshore. We'll probably be looking to ban other kinds of fishing in MPAs. I'm sure we'll look at other modalities and try and ban them elsewhere too. This will not stop. This will not stop. It is not about banning a particular activity in a particular place. It's about undermining the principle that we manage fisheries rationally based on evidence and replacing it with managing it by how people can be persuaded to feel about it in the absence of knowledge and facts. And that's a really dangerous precipice to step over.
I do wonder, I worry a bit as well, and you sort of alluded on it a short ago, was when you say about the politicians almost like swallowing it, and the amount of comparison with fishing jobs and, within the whole industry, is there a danger that where the political parties are getting their funding?
Yeah, funding makes the whole thing complicated, doesn't it? And as soon as politics enters into it, and to an extent everything we do is politics, and that's kind of right, and there should be a national debate about things, but everything gets muddied very, very quickly, and other interests come into play that are not connected to that grown-up conversation about what are we trying to do and how do we make sure we're still doing it next year. And what we're trying to do is produce food. Once we lose sight of that and people start seeing other benefits to themselves from attacking fishing, that sort of short-term notoriety and a moment. Politicians love a moment. If it'll give you a moment to give a speech saying we're going to ban something, it's not often in a politician's life they get to do a simple campaign to ban a thing and get lauded for it. So I can see why it's attractive, but it's going to hurt real people. Real people will lose their livelihoods that are actually genuinely positive for the population at large to pursue. Once self-interest and ambition start to play a part in it, we're at risk. I've talked to politicians about this ban quite a bit, and even those who are actually very supportive of us are quite clear when they say there's no way we can come out and say we support bottom trawling, because David Attenborough said it's bad. So, it doesn't matter that I actually don't believe him. I daren't say it.
Oh, awful.
And that's quite a thing, isn't it? I'm quite aware I'm kind of putting my neck out by talking about these sorts of things publicly. It just so happens that I don't really care what people say about me, so it doesn't really matter. Like I say, I've been a teacher. These things hold no fear for me. But people do worry about how they're going to be perceived and how they're going to be attacked by others. And that's, again, it's just an impediment to having that mature adult conversation about how we live in the environment that we are a part of.
The just transition is a buzzword. What do you really feel it means, and how should it apply to this debate?
Yeah, it's a really good question, because that's a phrase that's starting to be used more and more, and I've used it myself at times, but I think people use it to mean different things. Some people are now using it to mean kind of we want to ban bits of fishing, and how do we tell you we're doing that? For me, I kind of think of that more in terms of that strategic vision of fishing and strategic use of the sea. If we are, for me, that transition is not about how do we transition people from fishing to not fishing. The transition I was want to talk about is about how we use the sea. If we are transitioning from that state a couple hundred years ago, when the sea was for transporting people and goods, and it was for producing food. Now the sea is for doing lots of things. It's about producing aggregates. It's about laying telecoms cables. It's about generating power. If that's the seascape that we are transitioning towards, then there's got to be some justice in how that transition is managed, which means that the people already active, the businesses already active, the communities depending on the sea, need to be borne in mind when other government policies support a transition to something else. So that's what I think of as sort of the just transition issue. I think it's getting used more and more to mean something else, as I say, as in how do we justify closing fisheries down. But I want to think about how, if policy decisions are being made that will lead to a transition to a new kind of use of the sea, how do we ensure there's some justice for coastal communities in that, because a lot of the things that are done in the sea and around coastal communities don't benefit coastal communities. They're for the benefit of other people. In the case of offshore energy generation, they're for the benefit of people in other countries. And there needs to be some kind of social justice in how that's done. That's what it means to me, what I would like it to mean. Because that transition isn't being, or hasn't been up until now, done in a strategic way. We've leased bits of the seabed for wind farm construction piecemeal. We've had marine plans for different activities here and there. We've managed for fisheries in different places. We've licensed aggregate extraction, and none of it's been done in a very joined up way. And I think there are hints that we're starting to move towards that, and there is more coordination between the Crown Estate and government now than there was. But we really need to incorporate our industry into that, because all the places that are transitioning to a new use, in many of them we were using that. We were already there. We were doing something there. We were producing food. So that's what I mean by just transition.
Do you feel there's any genuine common ground between the fishing sector and the NGOs calling for bans?
I think there's a common ground between the fishing sector and many NGOs, not all. Some of them that are dedicated campaigning organisations that want a ban for the sake of a ban, that live on the sense of permanent crisis, because that's how they get their big corporate donations. There's very little common ground to be had there. We're not part of their, the common ground and coexistence are not part of their business model. Their business model is persuading a city firm that they can burnish their green credentials by giving them a large sum of money to go and care about things really deeply and to have a publicity campaign about it. Then if you look at other NGOs that are membership organisations, organisations like the Wildlife Trusts, the RSPB, which have large public followings, that have a bit of a remit to speak on behalf of large numbers of people. My experience of working with NGOs like that is entirely different. They are about seeing all the things that people do in the context of the environment they live in. They're folks with a genuine love of and concern for the natural world, or particular bits of it, who aren't really trying to exclude anybody else from it, and who are really willing to work with us and to coexist with us, and who fundamentally don't dispute our right to do what we do any more than I dispute their right to do what they do. I can have and have had for a long time.
You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. With Indeed sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates, so you can reach the people you want faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Don't wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/ARTS. Just go to Indeed.com/ARTS right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.
Perfectly sensible civil conversations with plenty of NGOs like that. We don't necessarily agree on anything. Actually, we agree on a surprising amount, or probably surprise people outside those conversations. We agree on quite a lot. We don't agree on everything, but we disagree like adults, and we respect one another's rights to have different views and to advocate for different views, because we fundamentally aren't doubting that the others should exist. Those organisations are not saying people shouldn't fish. They might have different ideas about how best to manage fisheries sometimes, and they have a right to call for that if they want to. But it's generally done with a view that fishing is still a good and decent thing to do, because they generally recognise the value that fishing has as kind of low-carbon, sustainable food that helps the sorts of people who are in their membership. It's really different if you're answerable to a membership rather than an investment panel.
Very true. Public pressure shapes policy, but how do we make sure that the science stays at the centre?
Yeah, it's a challenge, that one, isn't it? Because the science is supposed to be at the centre of the fisheries management plan agenda, and I feel like FMPs have slightly ground to a halt, frustratingly, at the moment. As long as politicians keep showing a willingness to turn fisheries management decisions over to or turn it into some sort of a popularity contest, that's always going to be challenging because the science is quite hard. The science is pretty complicated. I'm sure it's not just me that finds it that way. The general public are going to find it difficult to grasp quite a lot of that too. So turning it into a popularity contest is always going to just rub off all of the lumps and bumps and the nuances and make it kind of smooth and easily digestible. How will you do that? I don't know. People like me, I guess, have to keep advocating to government to listen to the scientists more. Really good science communicators like Mike Kaiser and others need to keep coming on podcasts like yours and telling everybody what it's all about. People like Mike, Mark, Dickie Collis, and others who do a great job of communicating. The Centre for Sustainable Seafood up in Shetland, just getting off the ground and starting to do some really, really great work. And then folks like Ray Hilborn and his institute over at University of Washington, who communicate really effectively to the public, have a role in persuading politicians to take science seriously. And take the duty to look at the facts seriously in making decisions.
I'm certainly not going to start telling you, Mike, in your position about what fishermen say because you're talking to them and representing them. But I'm sure you would agree any fisherman I have ever spoken to welcomes science.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You're completely right. I've never come across a fisherman who doesn't have an interest in it, want to know what it said, doesn't want to know what the results are, doesn't have enough knowledge to question some of the claims and start critiquing it. Fishermen know their business really, really, really well. And that's something that you know, but people outside the industry tend to miss somehow. And doesn't want it to be part of managing things, because fishermen are scientists themselves. They work empirically. They understand what works. They try things. They reject the things that don't work and focus on the things that do. They try and understand the world in a scientific way. That's the scientific method, isn't it? So there's a link. And also, of course, marine scientists generally love the sea and love being out on the sea and want to understand it more. That's exactly the same mindset that drives most fishermen too, isn't it? They love it. They want to be part of it. They want to understand it better and they want to work in it. So there's a lot of kinship and commonality there. Yeah, most fishermen I know are really happy to take a scientist out on the boat and to show them what they do and have a chat. Absolutely.
One of the things that kind of almost find a little depressing, and I don't know who to point the finger at, if there's anybody we can, is it just the way it is? But even back in the 50s when I was a kid, 1950s, you're talking 60 years ago, I can remember my father a lot of the times would say, the problem we have with fishing is we're such a small percentage of the GDP that we don't get the voice. And you just think to yourself, 60 years later, and we're still saying the same thing.
It's true. And yet, as I say, we're a small percentage of the GDP if you just look at first sale, but then it knocks on. And it gets really complicated, doesn't it, when you try and think about impact, particularly with something like fishing, because so many areas need fishing, not just for the supply of raw materials, but for what it adds to a place. There's a really big difference between a lively working harbour and an empty one. I used to work in Bridlington. I had an office right on the end of the quay, looking on the North Quay, looking down towards the fish quay on the other side of the harbour. And in the summer, Bridlington is packed with tourists. Coach tours drop off at the top of the harbour. People pour out. They go right to go onto the beach. They go left to walk around the harbour and buy their candy floss and their fish and chips. And they get those things and they sit on the quayside and they watch the boats come in and out and they watch the lobsters and the crabs unloading and they stay there. And the harbour could be packed. And I would come out of my office on a lunchtime, literally have to sort of push my way out the door through the crowds of people standing around watching the harbour, go around the corner to buy a sandwich, and town would be empty. Loads of tourists, and they were all in the harbour. They would not all be in the harbour to watch a handful of yachts tying up or just sitting there at anchor. They're there because they're watching that lively atmosphere of a fishing port in full swing, of boxes and boxes of things being craned up onto the quayside. That kept the town alive. That kept that kind of buzz and that life going. if you lost that fishing fleet, I think you would lose a substantial part of that tourist industry as well, because it just wouldn't have that lively atmosphere anymore. And those are the intangibles that make fishing so valuable, that make it part of coastal communities in a way that people miss. They also forget as well that fishing is it's a community in and of itself. Fishing is something special. You can fish. There's a culture and a community there that deserves respect on and of itself. It has its own traditions and superstitions and songs and modes of dress and names and working patterns. And that's important. That's not captured in a statistic very readily, but it really does matter to how places feel to people.
The one thing when you were saying there about songs and that, the one thing that I feel we lack now is celebration.
Yeah. And there's the odd example of it. There's brilliant seafood festivals scattered around the coast, but we don't have a lot, do we? We don't celebrate all the good that we do.
Absolutely. When the farmers celebrate the harvest.
Yeah, and there's some great seafood festivals around the place. I was moons ago involved in organising. It was a small part of helping to organise the first seafood festival in Bridlington a number of years ago, and it was absolutely fantastic. The harbour was rammed for 2 solid days with people coming to see what we did, and it was a fantastic atmosphere. So when we have the opportunity, when we are able to create the opportunity to celebrate, actually the general public does not sit on Facebook shouting at us. That actually most real people want to come down and experience and be part of it. And when I say we, I mean our politicians overestimate the importance of outrage on social media. The large majority of people are not rocking up to the quayside to yell at one of my members for daring to have a job. The majority of people that have anything to do with them at all just want to watch them unload their catch. Maybe if I chat to them about it, take a photo of their boat, and they love it. And we should stop being ashamed of what we do. And that's like starting to creep in. There's a certain defensiveness in the way I feel about things. And I got to kind of give myself a bit of a talking to there, because we should be really, really proud of what we do. And most people love it. Most people are fascinated by it. And our politicians need to remember that.
I couldn't agree with you more. One of the things that I still feel I use, and is, well, I'm quite far north here, far north of Scotland, so we get maybe long nights in the dark winters, and just say we have a frosty night and you're seeing all the planets and stars and the constellations. I can pick them out and recognize them where different points, looking north or east or wherever, and know the constellations. Like, I learnt all that from my father. That's what they use for navigation and seasonal, tendencies and things.
Yeah, we lose a lot when we lose old traditions and old understandings of things, don't we? And when we give people the opportunity to think about them, to celebrate them, they love it. They lap it up. So yeah, more of that. Maybe it would be nice to be talking about as a sort of a national celebration of this in the future.
Yeah.
Something that I remember asking our current fisheries minister about when they were in opposition. Like, could we have a fish week? Could we have a national celebration of what we do? And the last government had its farm to fork events at 10 Downing Street. Myself and Elspeth from the SFF, the only people involved in that supposed celebration of British food from the fishing industry. I remember asking at the time, well, can we have net to plate under the next government, please? Where's the championing? Are you happy to stand in the garden at 10 Downing Street and Rishi Sunak was Prime Minister giving a speech and getting everybody to clap for farmers repeatedly, and never a mention of fishing? And I really hoped we might start to see some better appreciation for what our industry does, just as valuable as what the farmers do in our way. But it's lacking. It's about time we had some more positivity from politicians.
When you're saying that, I'm thinking of something, a comment, but
We're talking Jeremy Clarkson here.
Jeremy Clarkson.
That's it. Yeah.
One of quite a number of fishermen in a conversation were saying, I wish Jeremy Clarkson had a fishing boat.
That's something I've heard so many times. Yeah, we need fishing's Jeremy Clarkson. Yeah, I don't think we've got one on the horizon. Maybe we'll see if we can rustle one up from somewhere. Yeah, it would be nice, wouldn't it? It would be nice to have that that kind of media face of it. But again, sad that we feel we need it, isn't it? An industry that's been, a commercial reality for hundreds and hundreds of years, and now we wish a celebrity would take it up as a hobby, so people stop belittling us quite so much and trying to ban us. What a shame.
It is, but I feel there's a positive slant to Mike, that it has survived this many hundreds of years, and I'm confident that it's going to survive another.
Absolutely. Yeah, I completely agree. We need it. The nation needs it. The planet needs it. We cannot feed everybody just from ever increasingly intensive agriculture. We need to balance it with food as well, and aquaculture. Food, I mean fishing and aquaculture too, and using the sea to produce food. We need to do that. We have to. Bearing in mind, of course, that the British fishing industry doesn't just feed people in Britain. We should be really proud of the fact that we export food to lots of places that also benefit from that and also are made more secure and less hungry because of what British fishermen do. But yeah, it will last. It has to. We have to make sure, though, that before we get to the point where people in power come to their senses and let it last, we have to ensure that too many people don't suffer in the interim by ill-founded and poorly considered knee-jerk measures that won't help, won't work.
Can we realistically feed a growing global population without bottom trawling?
It's a good question. We certainly can't realistically feed a growing global population without food from the sea, and there's no doubt that bottom trawling has to be an important part of that mix. It is a necessary way of producing enough food. So I don't think we can. We shouldn't be excluding any modalities for producing food at this stage. We sort of started off by saying this. Too many people are too comfortable with the idea that somebody somewhere who knows what they're doing will make sure they've got enough to eat. And that it doesn't matter what they do. Somewhere a grown-up will make sure everything's okay. Someone's looking after you. Well, no, it does. The real world isn't like that. We shouldn't be vandalizing our food production capacity for no good reason. We shouldn't be taking anything out of the mix. That includes bottom trawling, includes all of it.
Very good. Very powerful. Here's a challenge. If you had 5 minutes face-to-face with Attenborough, what would you say to him?
My goodness. I'd ask him what he would want to say face-to-face with a trawlerman. What would he want to know from them about what they do and understand? I guess I'd ask him a question. I'd ask him if he realised what he was using his huge power to do, and if he really intended that, and if he really wanted that, and what he felt he needed to know from the people who do know about bottom trawling to put his mind at rest about the impact we're having in this country. Because I think there's no malice at all in what David Attenborough did through his involvement in reading the script for that film. But he's now being portrayed as somebody who is, and praised in some quarters, for being an enemy of the fishing industry. And I don't really think he is. I don't think he is for a moment. I think his whole career shows that he's a sensible and balanced individual in his approach to the natural world to the real world. So if I had 5 minutes, I'd want to say to him, okay, what worries you so much, and what more do you need to know to put your mind at rest when it comes to my industry and what it does? And what would you say to a fisherman if you realised how much this could hurt them and their livelihoods and their families?
And when you ask him what he wants, would you be happy to tell him?
I'd be happy to tell him what I want. I'm in a privileged position to have disagreed with many people about these sorts of things, even the king on one occasion. So I'm quite happy to have a civil disagreement with anybody if it calls for it, so long as they're willing to civilly listen to me doing so. I don't get the impression that David Attenborough in his career has ever been afraid to have a good debate with somebody else. But I mean, the man's nearly 100 years old. We should probably let him have a rest at this point. So I'm not asking to have an argument with David Attenborough. I'm just asking the question of what would I say to him if I could. He's done an enormous amount of good for our understanding of an appreciation for the natural world. But this is back to unintended consequences again. I think the impact of what he's read out in this film could be something that he's perhaps maybe hasn't considered fully. I'd like to think so anyway, because I've always been a huge fan of his work, and I don't want to think that one of his last pieces is attacking an industry I love so much.
You've left a question wide open there. What about the king?
Yeah, well, indeed, Prince William has certainly had a fair few things to say about trawling. He got roped into publicising this movie, which is another marketing coup from the organisers. Yeah, it would be really nice to have that conversation. I know many conservation organisations have been very close to the royal family. I would really like to have the opportunity to talk for more than a few seconds at a reception, which is the one occasion I got to actually speak to him. As king, or again, I had very few seconds to speak to him at something else when he was Prince of Wales. I would love it if somebody, certainly doesn't have to be me, some good communicator from the fishing industry, and my goodness, we've got plenty of those. Fishermen are great at talking about what they do. I would love it if he would have the opportunity to talk to some of them and get them to put a perspective that he probably isn't exposed to very often to him, and give him the opportunity to ask them some questions directly. I would really like that. It would be beneficial to everybody, I think. So I won't hold my breath, but it would be nice. It would be really nice, wouldn't it, if he would come and speak to some fishermen.
Well,
and
he was in Scrabster and was on board the boy Andrew, and then came over and he was in a restaurant and he met a few, and we actually felt he actually did listen and took it on board.
Well, that's great. That's brilliant. And
he was Prince Charles then, of course. I have to say.
Yeah, and of course, as Prince Charles, one of his foundations started Fishing into the Future, which is an organisation that's done a load of good in helping fishermen to represent their own interests better and getting more and more fishermen involved in representation. So Fishing into the Future has done a load of good. I just wonder how much recent contact he's had with the industry and with our current concerns. I know he's had plenty of contact from people who are saying very different things. But I would, wouldn't it be great with somebody who's been such an effective advocate for conservation for such a long time, had a chance to really ask fishermen some questions, not in a few moments with a TV camera following his every move, but actually had a few minutes to have a proper conversation with someone and really ask those fishermen what it is he wants to know more about and get some straight answers. That would be a great thing.
I have to say, on that occasion, when we did have behind the cameras and all that, we were most impressed how switched on he was.
That's really good to hear. That's really great to hear. Fantastic. Well, maybe I will get my wish then. Maybe he will have the opportunity to chat to some fishermen again now that he's our head of state. I really hope so. I really do.
Totally agree with that. Which book or article do you think everyone involved in fisheries should read?
Ooh. Wow. I'm going to cheat a little bit and pick a website. I would suggest everybody takes a look at Ray Hilborn's website that deals with sustainable fisheries matters, because it's so full of so many things. Ray Hilborn is such a brilliant critical friend to the fishing industry, utterly unafraid to tell us when we are in the wrong in his view, and utterly unafraid of anybody else when it comes to saying that we think he's in the right. And So yeah, I'd probably point them at that. And also just about anything that Mike Kaiser writes is worth a read from anybody, because again, somebody who is not afraid of offending us in the industry, in the Mike being Mike, in the most polite and humorous way possible, never afraid to tell us when we're wrong, but at the same time, never afraid to defend us and defend food production to see when we think it's right. So yeah, I can't put to a single. There's just so many things you could choose, aren't there? Any of John Goodlad's books are worth a read as well, for really getting into understanding what it's like in the industry. But if one thing, go and read Ray Hilborn's website for a really, really good, really accessible summary of a lot of hard issues, ranging right from some really, really hard science analysis to some much more general stuff that sets it in a social context. Yeah, go and do that.
I couldn't agree with you more on all your choices, because, well, I've actually done an earlier podcast with Ray Hilborn, and fantastic he was. And with John, we've done a few podcasts now with John, and I'm currently reading his latest book, Food from the Sea. And I'm at a very early stages. I'm not a fast reader.
I have it on my desk. Yeah.
Well, I usually have it on my bed, and I'll 2-3 pages and it falls on my face.
It's great, isn't it? I'm really enjoying it. I'm reading it myself at the minute. I was lucky enough to be at the launch of it in London a few weeks ago, and a really enjoyable event that was, and a really enjoyable, interesting, and insightful talk that John gave on that occasion.
Yeah.
I was very fortunate to be there and to hear that. So yeah, I'd plug John's book for him. But yeah, it's very, very good. I'm enjoying it.
Unfortunately, I had to call off in the last minute, so I wasn't able to make it. Yeah.
No, you missed a treat. It was very good.
Yeah, I know. I've had a lot of respect for John, what he does. He's very highly thought of up here.
Indeed, and also somebody who's not afraid to say the good and the bad, and to criticise us as well as to praise us, and doing so from such a huge amount of knowledge from within the industry really gives what he says some authority. So I'd recommend his stuff too.
One word, Mike, to describe the future of British fisheries.
I'm going to be unusually optimistic for me and say potential. There is loads of untapped potential sat there waiting to be given the opportunity. We just need to be given the chance to grasp it, to take it, given the time to start thinking about those positive things and not reacting to the latest kicking we've been given by Parliament or social media. There is huge potential. There is reason for hope and for optimism and enthusiasm for the industry, because there's so many good people trying to do it better and do it more and get it more right year on year. And to answer that question, how do we catch enough fish for our needs next year? There's so many good people working to answer that. There's such a lot of potential. There's some great people in some fantastic officials, as well as fishermen, as well as scientists. There's some people who really, really care, trying to help make management better. Genuinely, there are. And we've got more collaboration between managers and scientists and fishermen than ever before. So there's lots of potential out there. We just need to be given the freedom to grasp it.
That's a really good way of putting it. Yeah, I like that.
Thank you very much.
Where can our listeners follow you and keep up with your work?
The NFFO's website, nffo.org.uk, has posts from me on it as often as I get a chance to write them. We are not, as an organisation, particularly active on social media. We should probably be more so. The world is increasingly conducted on it, isn't it? But for the time being, have a look for us on our website and the blog posts we put out on there, and have a read about fishing news too, and things like the Fishing Daily. We put things in all of these places from time to time, and they're a good way to keep up with us.
Mike, that's just fantastic. I think maybe a good time to fold up. And I would genuinely like to thank you. I love the way you put your message across.
Thank you, Skyler. It's been a pleasure to do this. I am slightly out of my comfort zone doing these things, as I have a face for radio and a voice for newsprint. But it's been surprisingly enjoyable. Thanks for the conversation.
Thank you. That's good to hear. Thank you.